Hi everybody, this is Dana Green Remedios. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, and on this channel I do several things including answering your questions, which I call Ask Dana. So one of the most recent questions that I received really is a specific one to a specific person, but I'm sure that many of you can benefit. I'm going to be talking about why some nutrient levels may be lowering in the body over time, if that might indicate malabsorption, and if it is malabsorption, what you can do about it or why it happens in the first place. I'm going to first talk about a particular nutrient, ferritin, and why it might be low in the body. And then I'll talk about malabsorption more generally, what absorption is, why malabsorption might happen, and finally, some of the strategies that you might be able to use if you think that you might be suffering from or dealing with malabsorption. All right, let's get going. So malabsorption of nutrients is something that basically would occur at the second stage in becoming well nourished. So in terms of becoming well nourished, you need to have dietary nutrients, meaning you need to have them coming into your body. And then the second thing that has to happen is you need to be able to assimilate those nutrients and use them. So you're not just what you eat, you're also what you eat and assimilate. And so it could be that there's a problem at the level of the diet, which is of course something that I am very happy to help with as a nutritionist. But it could also be that there's something at the level of the different things that are happening in the body, the digestion or absorption of these nutrients. So ferritin is a particular form of iron. It's the storage form of iron. And if your levels of ferritin are low, this can result in many symptoms. And there are lots of reasons why this could happen. Our iron, including our ferritin, is tightly regulated in the body. And if you're getting only plant-based sources of iron, the body's in charge of regulating how much is going to be absorbed. If you eat heme iron or meat sources of iron, the body's levels of iron will just go up a lot more consistently without you necessarily having to think about it quite as much. However, for those of you that either want to keep your meat consumption low or for whatever reason are not getting iron from meat, even if that's only a part of your iron absorption, you always have to think about what part of the iron is coming from plants, how much of the iron in your diet is coming from plants. And the reason for that is that the iron that comes from plants can be interrupted in its absorption by the other components that are in those plants that you're consuming. So for example, spinach is a very iron-rich plant, has a lot of iron, but that's not the only aspect that you have to consider. You have to consider the anti-nutrients that come with that plant and how that affects or impacts the absorption. So in the case of ferritin, if you're not absorbing it well, maybe that the anti-nutrients that are in the iron-rich food that you're consuming are impacting the absorption of the iron in that food. With spinach, the main anti-nutrient would be oxalates. With wheat and many other grains, it would be phytates that would be the main anti-nutrient that's interrupting the absorption. In the case of some other foods, there may be things that you're pairing it with that are getting in the way. So if you have iron at breakfast, it could be the eggs with the breakfast that are getting in the way of the absorption. The egg whites have albumin that can bind to the iron, or it could be that you're having coffee or tea. Coffee has been known to lower iron absorption, ferritin absorption up to 80%, and tea also has tannins and could potentially even be worse than coffee. All types of tea, true tea, green tea, black tea, that kind of thing. So I would avoid tea and coffee and combining my iron-rich foods with things that have a lot of fiber and phytates, or a lot of oxalates, which are often found in specific foods that I won't get into today, but you can Google it, or maybe at some other time I can make a video about oxalates or oxalic acid and how that can be a very problematic anti-nutrient. With regard to other combinations that may be impacting your ferritin levels, you can certainly look those up. There's certainly competition with things like calcium, which can get in the way, so dairy products can be problematic and other calcium-rich foods. However, some things that are beneficial are better intake of protein, so you can definitely watch your protein intake. With regard to ferritin, though, it isn't just the food that you're eating. The more active you are and the more you are running or having other activities where parts of your body are striking, so for example, martial arts, you're striking either a bag or you're striking another person, or other kinds of high impact sports. Anytime you're striking something, and for runners, the striking of the feet against the ground counts here, that's called foot strike hemolysis. And that can actually break red blood cells every time you strike your feet. It can break red blood cells, requiring faster turnover of red blood cells, therefore lowering your ferritin count, your iron count. So you need to make sure that if you're an athlete of any kind, that you potentially supplement with iron or think about the iron that you're consuming and how much you're getting. The other thing is that athletes also absorb iron worse than other people and other nutrients worse than other people because of the gut damage that occurs with high intensity exercise. From really forcing yourself to do something, you can have microbleeds in the GI tract that can impact it, as well as there is a particular enzyme called hepcidin, which goes up after we exercise, and it helps to down-regulate absorption of iron. So this is naturally something that rises over the course of the day, but for athletes, they may have extra bursts of this hepcidin, which can make it harder for them to bring up their levels of iron compared to other people. So those are some of the reasons why your ferritin levels may be going down. Also, if your ferritin is going to someone else because you are creating a life, because you are pregnant, because you have a placenta growing, anything like that, your own levels of ferritin may be drained from that. Or if you've had many children, or you've had abortions, or you've had pregnancies that didn't go to term, those still would have drained your iron levels. The more children that you've had, the more pregnancies that you've had, the more that would be an issue. So there's many, many factors. If we talk about some of the other issues around malabsorption, it's not all about ferritin and iron. So what's going on there if we have malabsorption? First of all, again, it's what dietary nutrients are coming into the body. And then it's also about what you're combining those nutrients with as to how well you're going to be able to make use of them. But then the next thing that comes into play is the strength of your digestion. So your digestion may be a little bit weak, a little bit tired, or not functioning very well. You may have digestive issues and not be able to break down that food to be able to get the nutrients out. And finally, if you do have good digestion, you may find that you're not able to absorb the nutrients after you've broken them down, and that would be the final step. So it could occur at any one of those steps that you could have a problem with not getting the nutrients that you need. And so first determining whether it is your diet, the combinations of things that you're doing, the strength of your digestion, or the quality of your absorption, determining which of those things is the most likely to be the issue, or if it's a combination of those things, that's step one. Once you have determined that potentially you're having an issue either at the level of digestion or absorption, and that it isn't about your diet, then what I would suggest is understanding digestion first of all. So if you want me to just run you through some of the steps of digestion so that you understand that, let's do that now. So essentially, digestion begins in the mouth. You're going to be probably digestion even begins before that in your mind. So you're going to be thinking about eating. If it's a certain time, you may be on a circadian rhythm where your body is naturally ready to eat. That's a great time to eat. So eating on a schedule, you're going to be mentally and physically prepared to eat. then you're going to think about eating, and your body's going to start to create an environment that's ready to digest food. It should start to secrete all of the digestive liquids that you need to break food down. And so it helps to prepare your own food, because seeing the food, smelling the food, interacting with the food, looking at it, getting excited about it, tasting it as you are preparing the food, that can really help you to have a better experience. Also, your nervous system is going to control whether you get into the digestive mode or not. You're not going to get into digestive mode if the body does not know that you are safe. So you need to potentially do some grounding or some breathing exercises or a moment of reflection. Most cultures have something like a prayer before eating. Anything that helps you to shift into what we call the parasympathetic dominant state of relaxation is also the state of resting and digesting, instead of being in something like fight or flight, which is the sympathetic mode where digestion can't happen. So a few minutes of dropping in, grounding yourself, breathing before a meal is wonderful. And if you want to do a practice like gratitude before a meal, that's wonderful too. So for example, in Japanese culture, we say itadakimasu before we eat. There are a lot of people who pray before eating. Trying to incorporate that as a habit may help you. Now, once you are at the level of the mouth, of course, we have the physical aspect of chewing. Really using your mouth, chewing foods is important. So while I love a good smoothie as a vehicle for nutrient density, it's really great to use your mouth to chew and to eat hard, crunchy foods that require chewing, whether that be a carrot stick, whether that be a steak. You want to chew. So nuts, things like that, that can be a really good exercise for the mouth. Once you have established that you're in a good state for eating a meal and you're feeling ready and excited about the meal, chewing it really, really well until it's a liquid is wonderful. If you're like me and you have a hard time slowing down, this might feel like a challenge. But what you're essentially trying to do is give the amylase and other enzymes that are in your saliva a chance to work on the food, and you're giving your teeth a chance to break it up physically to start the digestive process from a physical standpoint. So you want to break the food up, and then you want to have the enzymes start to act on it, because digestion, it really has three parts. So it has the physical, which is things like chewing and breaking apart. Then you have the chemical, which is going to continue to break things apart into their component pieces. And then you have the bacterial, which is going to help us to digest as well. So with regard to the physical, it starts with chewing. It also depends on the condition of the esophagus, of the mucous membranes, of the digestive tract. It's going to depend on the movement of the digestive tract and the migrating motor complex, which creates peristalsis to move things through the digestive tract. And it's going to depend on the condition or permeability of the lining of the digestive tract. Now, chemical digestion is going to be where you have enzymes and acids. You're going to have bile salts, you're going to have pancreatic juices, things like that, bicarbonate, and so both alkaline and acidic components are both part of digestion. You're going to need all of that chemistry to work, because that's how you take proteins to amino acids, that's how you take fats to fatty acids, and carbohydrates become sugars and more simple starches as we break them down, and fibers become broken down as well. So we need that component. And then the fibers are in particular going to need the bacterial aspect, which comes after both the physical and the chemical, and happens at the very end of the digestive tract. That's when you need the bacteria on board to help you. So if there's physical damage, if there's chemical insufficiency, or if there's bacterial insufficiency or imbalance, then it's not going to work. Part of this digestive process is going to fall apart unless you have all of those different components. That's a lot of different moving pieces. And so there are a lot of places where malabsorption can happen, or just poor digestion, that impedes you from getting to the place where you can have good absorption. If you have physical damage, that can happen, and it can be physical, that can be created in a lot of different ways. So some of the ways might be infections can cause physical damage, inflammation can cause physical damage. You can also have surgeries that could have caused something, or other physical traumas that can happen myriad different ways. And you can also have medicine cause a damage, or a disease process cause a damage. So for example, a disease process like celiac disease, you're actually, the lining of the digestive tract is being damaged every time there is any exposure to gluten. You're actually harming the digestive tract physically. So you do want to rule out physical causes for any impacts to the physical breakdown that has to happen in digestion. If that's not happening, you might want to investigate why. So one reason that you may have physically a broken migrating motor complex, where the peristalsis isn't moving in the body. One typical reason that this might happen is a truly bad infection, like a very bad case of food poisoning, for example, or post-infectious illness that can happen from potentially traveling, can happen from drinking bad water. Any of these reasons can expose you to enough of an infectious agent that it damages the migrating motor complex. When you have bacteria that are also creating biofilms, the biofilms that they create, it's for example, when you have plaque and tartar on the teeth, that's the bacteria on your teeth creating something hard to hide under, so that it's hard for you to get at them and get rid of them. That can happen in your intestines as well. And so if they're creating this, you can imagine that coating that they create so that you can't get rid of them is also impeding absorption, and it's also making it harder so that your intestines can't contract and move in the same easy way as they could if that bacterial biofilm or hard substance wasn't there, if that makes sense. So getting rid of the effects of an infection and getting rid and healing from that infection could be something that you might want to focus on if you think you have a physical impediment to your digestive process. The next most relevant thing that we have to look at with regard to digestion is the chemical processes. If you have chemical malabsorption, then you're going to have nutrient deficiencies for sure. So the process starts with the enzymes. So we have enzymes that break down carbohydrates, things like amylase, which can turn starches into sugars, cellulase, which can turn complex fibers into smaller pieces. You can also have things like alpha-galactosidase, which helps with the fermentable carbohydrates like in beans to become more digestible. So these are all enzymes that can help to digest carbohydrates. You also have enzymes that can help to digest fats. So these are lipases, and you can take a fatty acid molecule and turn it, or a fat molecule and turn it into triglycerides and fatty acids and its different component parts as well. And so you can also do this with protein. We take proteases. There may be lots of different types of proteases that are different in the different pH environments of the digestive tract. They can be acidic. They can be alkaline, these environments. And so some proteases are active in some of them, and some proteases are active elsewhere and triggered by the pH to some extent. And they will break down proteins into amino acids, and then they become absorbable. So if you are short on amylase in the mouth, that may impact your carbohydrate absorption. If you're not creating lipase, if you're not creating protease, then you won't be able to digest fats or proteins, respectively. Makes sense, right? And so there's a whole process that when food goes down and enters into the stomach, that this is going to stimulate release of some different components of digestion, chemical components of digestion. If there is enough of a release of, if there's enough of a sensation of food in there, then there should be a triggering of the closing of the valve between the esophagus and the stomach, so that all the acidic contents of the stomach don't then come back up. And that acid is there to help to break all that food down from a chemical perspective. Now, it's also going to help when the food and all that acid gets released on the opposite end through the other valve of the stomach. When it's released, that is going to trigger some release of other chemicals like CCK and secretin. And these are going to be coming into the small intestine after the stomach, released into that area, and to continue the process of the digestion. If there's a problem with the pancreas, you may not have sufficient enzymes created. You may have problems secreting the compounds that you need. If you don't have CCK, then you're not going to trigger the release of bile, which is made by the liver. So if the pancreas isn't working to make CCK, then if there's no CCK, you might not make bile. If you don't have bile, you won't be able to continue the digestion of the fats, and you won't be able to get all the fat-soluble nutrients, and that can cause malabsorption. So you need to make sure the liver's functioning, the pancreas is functioning, and that whatever needs to happen to get CCK to release or to get bile to release, that these things are happening. And bile will also trigger release of pancreatic juices. And so you can see that this is all one thing connected to the next, and you need to make sure that the whole process works, or something might get stuck along the way. What else? So yeah, you're chewing to start the process. Your stomach continues the process. In the small intestine, this is where we're going to be doing most of our absorbing. And so this is where the process could break down if you don't have the things that we just talked about going on. You may not be absorbing in the small intestine. Other things that might get in the way is if there's not enough signaling of secretin. Then secretin, it's going to trigger the release of bicarbonate. So bicarbonate is the opposite of stomach acid. It helps to neutralize acid, so that now we're moving into an alkaline state. So some things are going to be digested best by the acid, and other things are going to be broken down by the alkalinity. So this is also going to be important that we have enough secretin and enough bicarbonate to continue everything happening in the body. Some of the things that might get in the way of that are, to some extent, your taste buds are involved. So you have taste receptors, not just on your tongue, because of course you have sour, sweet, bitter. So different regions of your tongue have different taste buds that are going to be sensing different tastes. So we have sour, sweet, bitter. We also have we have oleogustus, which is actually the taste of fat. So we have multiple different things that we can taste. And if you don't taste the bitterness enough, then you're actually impeding some of your digestive functions. We need to taste all of these things to be well-rounded. And so if you're favoring salt, the taste of salt, and you're favoring the taste of sweet, you're really hampering your digestive process. You need to also taste sourness, and you need to taste bitterness in order to get the body producing the types of responses that you need. So in order to get optimal levels of CCK, for example, you do need to taste bitterness. Sourness, bitterness is very helpful. And I would recommend, if you're having trouble with bile, or in other words, CCK production, to ensure that you're eating more bitter foods. So bitter foods in spring is something that is naturally going to be something that the body seeks out. They're growing because greens are starting to grow in springtime, and the liver, it's a great time of year to refresh the liver and help the liver out, and bitter foods can help with that. So this is a great time of year to focus on those kinds of foods, sour foods, bitter foods, whereas summer is a naturally sweet season. These things are natural and happen in waves. We tend to favor fattier, saltier foods in winter. This isn't a mistake. So all of this happens in balance. Your balance of salt to potassium, it's not just sodium to potassium. It's not just about your preferences. These things also help to regulate some of the processes in the digestive tracts. For example, your valves are very dependent on the balance of electrolytes, whether you're getting enough calcium, whether you have more sodium to potassium. All of this is going to affect your digestion. So eating seasonally makes a lot of sense for this reason. So we've covered some of the chemical as well as some of the physical things that are involved in digestion. As we move down the digestive tract and we leave the small intestine and we pass into the colon, this is where bacteria are really found in huge numbers, and this is where we're going to focus on next, is the bacteria. So the bacteria help to break down our, like especially our fibers. That's not something we break down very well. And they also can either create or block the creation of some of the chemical components. So having the right bacteria is really important. You don't want to have too many of the wrong ones, because that's definitely going to impact you, and you want to have enough of the right ones. That's really important for overall health. So if breakdown's happening properly and you've got the right foods going in, so right foods going in, right foods being broken down, then absorption's generally happening in the small intestine before you get to the large intestine where most of the bacteria reside. But if the bacteria that reside in the colon have moved up to the small intestine, that can block the absorption or create malabsorption in the small intestine. So if bacteria from the colon move up to the small intestine, you might have carbohydrate malabsorption, which is related to something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And that might be something that you need to rebalance or fix. So let's shift into talking about some of the things that you can do. What can you do if you think that you have malabsorption? First, optimize your digestion, because that is, you need to have things broken down enough to be able to absorb them. So what you can do to help your digestion, physically, you can chew. You can be relaxed before you sit down to have a meal. You can chew. You can take care of the condition of your mucosal lining with some soothing things like slippery elm or aloe or DGL, which is deglycerized licorice, teas. There's lots of things that you can do. Many people might suggest glutamine for this. I might not in this particular case. But anything that can help you with permeability. So eating, avoiding junk food, avoiding stress can help with issues of the permeability. And if you think that you have issues with the movement, then you might want to look at something like a biofilm disruptor, which is a type of herbal combination that might actually help you to break down biofilms so that your guts are able to move again, so the migrating motor complex is able to move things along. So the next thing you might want to look at is the chemical process of digestion. So I would support enzymes are something that your body can make, and you do need to be well hydrated to be able to make them. You need to be able to relax to be able to make them. You need to support your organ function to be able to make them. If you're doing all of that and you're not making enough enzymes, or even if you're not doing all of that and you think you just need to start digesting your food better, you can supplement with digestive enzymes. I recommend to use the fungal type, not just the ones extracted from fruit like papain and bromelain, although those are good. But I would also, and I would eat them too, but I would get the fungal types of supplemental enzymes because those are a lot stronger and they don't harm your ability to make your own enzymes. So taking them really can help you to chemically break down your food better. Another thing that you can take is called a digestive bitter. So you may know Angostura bitters. They're usually sold alongside alcoholic beverages, but you don't need to take them with alcohol. You can take them as an aperitif to before you eat, something to help you to improve your digestion. And there are lots of other really custom and neat small industry formulas out there, really, really neat ones. I would look into them, experiment. There's lots of different things that can be used to help to stimulate digestion, and these formulas will include many of them, which can include anything from very bitter plants like artichoke and dandelion to things that help to stimulate the liver like boldo or perhaps milk thistle or blessed thistle or burdock, things like this. And they often will have other types of plants, and herbal medicine is just wonderful in this area. There's a wealth of knowledge all around the world for helping out your digestion. So look into digestive bitters. The most famous of all the formulas is probably called Maria's Swedish formula, although she's Austrian, it's a Swedish formula. And you can look that up, but bitters and eating bitter foods and drinking bitter teas and things, definitely something I would suggest. What else? So if you're not digesting your food very well, or your digestive tract is damaged somehow, and you know this, and you just need to absorb your food better, or you're actually have signs of malabsorption, one thing that you can try is called an elemental diet. So I actually have some. I should have probably brought it on camera to show it to you. There are companies that make this as a product, and what they're basically doing is they're giving you fatty acids, and they're giving you amino acids. So they're giving you the breakdown products of food so that you can get that without having to break it down yourself. So if your digestion is broken and you need to recover, a few weeks of just consuming an elemental diet, which is kind of like a protein powder, but it's not protein, it's amino acids. You just take that and you mix it with water and you drink it. If you do that for a few weeks, it might be very costly to buy that product, but you're not eating any other food, you're just doing elemental diet. This could heal your digestive tract, and this could really give you the freedom to get back to eating other things. It may give your digestive tract the time to heal that it requires so that you can expand your diet or start to absorb your food better afterwards. So that is also an option. And additionally, if you think that you may have a bacterial imbalance, you'd probably want to look into rebalancing the microbiome. I'll make a whole other video on that. And physically, you can also, if you think that you've had physical damage to the body, you can look at getting some body work that may help to break up adhesions. So I've definitely had people that I've spoken with that have had terrible digestion for years and not known why, and sometimes it was left over from an accident, sometimes it was left over from a surgery, and adhesions is scar tissue, right? So we call that adhesions, and the fibrin or the different types of connective tissues that are made are not healthy and flexible, and they don't allow movement of the organs. And often, I mean, if you've watched Grey's Anatomy, you've watched any kind of surgery, you probably know that adhesions can be really problematic when people are trying to move organs around. If they're all stuck together with connective tissue, they're not going to be as healthy, and they're going to be a lot harder for people to, surgeons to work with, for example. So adhesions aren't good. They can definitely get in the way of healthy blood flow, circulation of nutrients, movement of organs, and operation of organs. So if you think that you have adhesions, it doesn't have to be from an accident or an injury or a surgery. It can actually just be from sitting with really bad posture for too long all the time, and actually over time things will just start to adhere. Our organs can start to form connections to our spine, and things can get really, really sticky. And so there are a lot of new areas opening up in the realm of body work where we can actually heal this using long, slow pressure, using like blocks or wood or different tools and implements where we actually just open things up. You can open things up with your own hands, like just try and break it up with your own hands. But, I would definitely look to an expert. There are some really good methods out there. I know of the melt method. There are some other practitioners out there that you can definitely look at. Yamina, she has some stuff on YouTube. There are people that you can look at. There's the block method from a woman in Saskatchewan, I believe. These are some things that you should certainly look at if you think that adhesions might be something that is happening for you. So that was a lot of information. We broke down digestion, we broke down absorption to some extent, and all of the things that happen physically, chemically, and to some extent bacterially in the body. Why might you be having malabsorption? It could be really any of these different things, from infections to diseases to, something breaking down along this pathway. I hope that this was helpful for you, that it answered your question. If it did help you, please leave me a comment and let me know. If you still have any questions, leave that in the comments for me. And I will also be trying to do some more informative videos about the bacterial side of things, probiotics, prebiotics, and how to create a healthy microbiome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Dana Green Remedios, a triple board certified holistic nutritionist, and I love helping you to find better health, happiness, and mind and mood mastery. And if I can help you to learn a little bit more about nutrition and loving, nourishing yourself, then my job is done. Thank you so much for joining me today.